concepts of globalization. So you'll be watching some videos, short videos about globalization, trying to align our understanding to what really is globalization. This is the first topic because we are trying to identify the direction we are leading to because all of our discussions covers this same topic, globalization, though it has different dimensions, is what we have mentioned. And also at the same time, in some other schools like Ateneo, they've been teaching or discussing this one for one whole period for 5 weeks just to cover up this discussion. But in our case, probably we will not so much focus primarily on concepts and definitions of globalization alone, but we will have a glimpse and a better understanding of what it is so that we can use that one in order to move forward, trying to understand other point of view in relation to globalization, especially on its structure, the influence of it to different to the creation of different regions, ideas, and even to the movement of people and the number of people in the world, including at the end discussing the importance of ethical responsibility and citizenship, global citizenship. So, what is really globalization? What do we want to achieve in trying to discuss this topic? Okay, so we are expecting that at the end of this discussion, you students will be able to identify the underlying philosophies of the varying definitions of globalization. Okay, kung ano ba yung basihan, bakit kailangan nating maintindihan, kumbaga, yung concept na globalization. Okay, the term underlying philosophies. Ano ba yung hindi lang definition, kundi bakit bakit ganito yung the way pagka-present ng meaning ng globalization. Okay? So underlying philosophies of the varying definitions of globalization. Second, uh, you will be able to differentiate the competing conceptions of globalization. It is as if that each of this definition is actually the definited meaning of the globalization. Kumbaga, what they present is somehow what globalization truly is, as if it's the whole and definite meaning of globalization. But it's important that we trace back and identify each of them so that we can have a clear understanding why they end up saying that this is definition. So to start with, when we ask the question, when we ask the question, what is definition? Uh, Probably we can have a good background if we listen to this presentation of the definition, meaning, and how globalization was being explained. And if we listen to this video at the same time, uh, the video presents not just one dimension of globalization, though it's a bit sporadic in some sense when explaining the definition of globalization, but it explains the very concept of what globalization is. So I would like you to listen to this part of the discussion.
What is globalization? Broadly construed, globalization is the word used to describe the growing interdependence of the world's economies, cultures, and populations, brought about by cross-border trade in goods and services, technology, and flows of investment, people, and information. Countries have built economic partnerships to facilitate these movements over many centuries. But the term gained popularity after the Cold War in the early 1990s, as these cooperative arrangements shaped modern everyday life. Globalization can also be understood as the process by which ideas, knowledge, information, goods and services spread around the world. In business, the term is used in an economic context to describe integrated economies marked by free trade, the free flow of capital among countries, and easy access to foreign resources, including labor markets, to maximize returns and benefit for the common good. As we can see, one important characteristic of globalization is that it is driven by technology, transportation, and international cooperation. In fact, since ancient times, humans have sought distant places to settle, produce, and exchange goods enabled by improvements in technology and transportation. But not until the 19th century did global integration take off. Following centuries of European colonization and trade activity, that first wave of globalization was propelled by steamships, railroads, the telegraph, and other breakthroughs, and also by increasing economic cooperation among countries. The globalization trend eventually waned and crashed in the catastrophe of World War I, followed by post-war protectionism, the Great Depression, and World War II. After World War II, in the mid-1940s, the United States led efforts to revive international trade and investment under negotiated ground rules, starting a second wave of globalization, which remains ongoing, though buffeted by periodic downturns and mounting political scrutiny. The wide-ranging effects of globalization are complex and politically charged. As with major technological advances, globalization benefits society as a whole, while harming certain groups. Indeed, the benefits and disadvantages of globalization are the subject of ongoing debate. The downside to globalization can be seen in the increased risk for the transmission of diseases like Ebola, or severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, or in the kind of environmental harm that scientist Paul R. Furumo has studied in microcosm in palm oil plantations in the tropics. Globalization has of course led to great good, too. Richer nations now can, and do, come to the aid of poorer nations in crisis. Also, increasing diversity in many countries has meant more opportunity to learn about and celebrate other cultures. As a matter of fact, the sense that there is a global village, a worldwide us, has emerged. What is globalization? What is global?
Okay, so let's summarize shortly the video. So the video does not focus on the aspect that globalization is just economically, but it points to that at some point, because of economic cooperation between countries, it leads to the understanding of how globalization works. Okay, though it's not primarily just focused on economic globalization, it can be seen also with the interdependence. It's in a short presentation we can say that globalization can be likened to or can be uh, described as the interdependences of peoples all around the world. Okay, that is being characterized at the same time with information technology, okay, transportation, and even with the integration of markets and culture. Okay, so the video also explains that globalization has been seen in different aspects. Okay? So, hindi lang siya cultural, hindi lang din siya economical, but in different aspects, even political. Okay? It also shows that because of the advent of transportation and technology, mas clear na sa atin ano ba yung direction ng globalization. However, let me just put a stop there because probably we may understand globalization as somewhat uh fueled by information technology and transportation, just like what we have now, that are able to understand globalization more specifically as we move forward sa mamaya sa definition. We can make use of an example of what's really happening now, even if the one being mentioned roughly wala pang ganoon na setup like the social media, but the presence of those social media directly explains the situation that we are in, the so-called globalization. Okay? But the question is, where do we put us in this globalization? Because in truth, the main component of globalization is people. Kumbaga, if there are no people around, there can be no globalization. Okay? The only thing that makes globalization possible was actually because of people. And that people interacts with one another, trying to reach out despite their difference in distance, places, location, and all other things related to that. And it made possible because of the presence of information technology, transportation. Imagine America, Manila can be reached in more than an hour from Davao City when you ride an airplane as long as walang aberya. So, pwede kang makaabot agad sa Manila in just 1 hour, more than 1 hour. Okay? So before, mahirap masyado. When we talk about traveling, flying from one place to another, it takes a very long time, just like what happened before. That's the reason why when the opening of the Swiss Canal in 1834, eventually Asian countries was able to reach Europe easily. Did not pass by Antarctica anymore. So, ganun yung isang setup. Especially nowadays that we use airplanes. Kung noon barko lang, naghahanap lang ng ibang ruta papunta sa lugar na kailangan nilang puntahan, and it became a way for them to uh, modify their travel and easily reach out. So naging isang way na siya para mas ma-reach nila yung ibang lugar sa mundo kahit na malayo. How much more today that we have already airplanes, okay? And even reaching out to other people by talking to them, we can have video call. So noon, type-type lang sa keypad, tapos or pen pal lang. And eventually nowadays, we can now talk to people just like what we are doing now. Probably some of you, because it's a holiday, since we are just having online class, baka ang iba sa inyo nasa ibang lugar na din, naka-travel na din, and we are having class here. So, naka-base tayo sa Davao City. Pero pwede kayong kahit saan man sa mundo as long as you have the internet and you reach the same time with us. So, nagiging isang solusyon na siya. Okay. So now, this topic introduces the concepts and various definitions of globalization as a process, condition, and ideology. So we will try to examine whether globalization can just be limited to a process, condition, or ideology, or even the combination of three. It exposes the learners to the academic and unbiased definition of globalization. So hindi lang yung nakikita natin sa society based on how we evaluate it, but based on the literature presented to us by different people who studied about globalization as of today. So it's more of a non-biased definition of globalization, that is based on from the political scientists, economists, and even culture and communication experts. Uh, I always observe class that some people tries to deny the presence, or if not denies, but more importantly, parang it's like more of being different with the presence of other communication experts who can be contributor in many fields, but they fail to understand the situation we are in now. Napakalaki ng role ng mga communication experts, because most likely they are the one creating a culture in every society based on the language that they are using. Okay? Kumbaga, for example, the term dele lang, it has been used mostly by people, especially in your generation, even if it's just a funny expression. But when we try to deliver that one, it develops a certain mindset to us that if you don't like the thing that we do, you can just say dele lang in a funny way. Okay? So the language that we are using now, or even uh, the use of language, has been one of the reason why a reality is being created out from it. Okay? So hindi lang siya parang we are being taught about the grammars, about the way we say it, but also the reality, that it creates, and even the culture that has been developed with with the language that we are using. Kaya nga they are also one of those few who have always something to say with globalization. So, what are accepted definitions of globalization? So, let's start with Giddens 1990. So, sa 1990 pa niyan to nasabi ha. Sabi niya, it defines globalization as the intensification of worldwide social relations. Okay? Grabe, no? It's an intensification of worldwide social relation. How those things be happening? Or how will those things happen? Paano ba magkaroon ng worldwide social relations? Okay, intensification of social interrelations which actually link distant localities. Remember 1990, wala pang masyadong, or wala pa talagang clear na establishment ng internet. Okay, may mga phones na pero hindi pa masyadong established. Okay? The language used, or the way phones are being used is tumatawag lang, wala pang masyadong text. Okay? But some other countries meron naman, Philippines medyo mahirapan pa tayo, late tayo masyado when we had the technology. But we can observe that even 1990, Gideon had already something to say about the situations or the interdependencies of people. That they have, that there is the presence of globalization, even 1990s below or before that, as people started to have an intensified social relationship or a worldwide social relationship, which can be seen when they try to link distant localities, yung kalayuan ng iba, okay, in such a way that local happenings are shaped by events occurring many miles away and vice versa. Parang sinasabi natin na yung the way we see things are being influenced with the things that had happened outside from the archipelago from Philippines. But because of the influence of those people around us, we carry with them the culture, the lessons, the learning, the language, and all other things that it actually affects the way we live. Ang best example natin dyan, if it is applicable today or if it is uh, kanang used today, is for example, yung mga different entertainment industries like Blackpink, yung sa Korea, BTS, yung mga gano'n, kahit na we were not able to meet them because of their influence in television and other part of the entertainment industry, we seem to like them. So it's affecting the way we live, it's affecting the way we see things, and even probably in dealing with things. May iba siguro, just like what uh, a speaker in contemporary world mentioned in their schools sa Ateneo daw, na pinapaglaban talaga yung paniniwala at saka pagmamahal towards those entertainment idols. Even, being mentioned si Taylor Swift, parang if you criticize Taylor Swift, so parang sabi niya, from Ateneo, baka pag-initan ka ng mga estudyante, eh, magagalit sila sa'yo. They will have a different way of seeing to you because of you, looking down or probably criticizing other people like Taylor Swift. So, gano'n yung impact. So I think that can be used to explain what Giddens is pointing to. Though kung titingnan natin 1990s class, medyo mahirap pa yun na gano'n na example. So meaning to say, kahit na gano'n, nakikita na ni Giddens yung impact, okay, ng social interdependencies, okay, ng social relationship between among people all around the world, that even if they are far from each other, they can still influence and they can still parang affect the way those people in different places see things, okay, because of your connections. Now, for Robertson naman, 1992, he defines globalization as a concept. Okay? So nagsisimula siya sa pagkakaintindihan or sa isang ideya. Okay? Is a concept that refers both to the compression of the world. Eh, medyo mabigat ito if we understand it literally. So it's a bit impossible that you can compress the world and the intensification of consciousness of the world as a whole. So, but if we look at it analogically, sinasabi dito that because of social interdependencies, because of globalization, because of how things are happening based on the different perspective that we observe, or idealism or understanding, we get to say that when we talk about globalization, we are always leading to understand that the world now is not anymore the world that we observe, that it's very big, that it's actually beyond measure, kumbaga, by an ordinary person. No matter how you try to walk, to travel, you cannot totally measure the measurement of the world. But it tells us more that the world is now being compressed. Parang pinaliit yung mundo. Okay? You cannot reach out to people despite your difference in terms of distance. At the same time, it's more of putting into our mindset that the world, because it's compressed, it's actually not separated from one another. Despite our differences in terms of race, that we belong to different countries, pinapakita ng globalization na isang mundo lang tayo. Na the world is a small, okay, area where we gather together in order to communicate. Village, home, uh, a place to stay with is not anymore limited to a physical space. Like Philippine archipelago can be social media sites like Facebook, Instagram that you can communicate with one another. Kumbaga, it can be considered a global village because many people from different races around the world house that certain social media or social media platform. Okay, so ganun yung perspective ni Robertson. Kung titingnan nyo class, they have different way of presenting but still speaks of the interdependencies of peoples that makes globalization understandable. The same thing applies to Harvey. So kung si Robertson medyo malalim na kasi it's more of comprehension of time and intensification of consciousness as a whole. Sabi naman ni Harvey in 1989, he introduced globalization as the compression of time and space. So he used already a term in physics. Unfortunately, if we talk about it in physics, you cannot really compress time and space. Ano kasi Ant-Man na you can make space and time smaller and mas matagal. And the annihilation of distance, as it's removing distance, that distance is not anymore a barrier whenever you reach someone. But it leads us to the understanding that Harvey is trying to give us an analogy that because of the presence of globalization, so hindi na masyadong mahihirapan, na makig-communicate, makig-reach out, kahit na napakalayo natin, we can communicate, we can talk about it just like what we are doing now. We don't know so much if you are still in Davao City or already traveled because of the long weekend. Nakaganda sa atin, online lang tayo. Unfortunately, sa mga Indians mamaya, I have to meet them face to face. So, holiday nga sa SPC Friday at saka Monday, may klase naman sila sa Saturday. So, unlike sa inyo, kahit na may klase tayo online, at least online lang din. So, but it shows class that Harvey is telling us that with the presence of globalization, parang distance anymore is not anymore a hindrance. Kahit nasan ka man sa mundo, if we have a means to communicate with one another, to talk, to meet, and even to see each other's image, through a form of video call, we can really communicate. Okay? Unlike before, magsulat ka lang. Even 1989, the presentation of Harvey, kung sa Pilipinas natin yan i-situate, so medyo mahirap pa na maintindihan yung sinasabi ni Harvey. And at the same time, most of the example that we could use is a bit different. Kasi if you try to intensify, or if you try to compress time and space, and annihilate distance, parang it's more of communicating, but it's more of a way of communication. But during this time in the Philippines, our way of communication is different. So yeah, we can call, we can reach out to one end of the line, pero hindi pa masyadong, kumbaga, uh, hindi pa mabigat na validation na it's really the person you are talking to when you have heard the voice of the person by calling the person, nor especially reaching out through a written letter na hindi pa ganoon kabilis. Kumbaga, you will still be waiting for a few weeks before your letter will be reached out to the sender. So, ganun yung setup. But still, Harvey has already been able to see that this is the the direction and the identification of globalization, that it tries to compress time and space and annihilate distance. Now, for Sunny Levin Institute class, it looks at globalization as a process. Kung kanina kay Robertson as a concept or an ideology, for Sun 11 Institute, it's a process. Okay? It's a process of interaction and integration among the people, companies, and governments of different nations. So it's a process because it did not just pass through or didn't just happen immediately. More and more understanding about it is when people started to interact and integrate, okay, themselves among each other. So, kumbaga, just because of movement, because of migration, because of communication, because of transportation, somehow people started to realize, that they can relate with one another, they can communicate with each other, they can reach out, okay, one another. So it's not anymore just limited to people. It's also the company that they carry with them, the government, of different nations, And it's a process driven by international trade. So, economically speaking, the reason why one nation reach out to other nation or company was also because of the international trade and investment that was aided by information technology. So, ganun yung explanation ng Sunny Living Institute. However, for Stiger, 2005, yung parang kumbaga recent talaga ng mga presentations about globalization was being continued by Stiger. Sikat ito sa concept na globalization. So, marami na siyang study about it. Sabi niya, the process being mentioned by Sunny Living Institute has actually effects on the environment, on culture, on political systems, even on economic development and prosperity, and human physical well-being societies around the world. So, what is the example that we could use that we could use that would explain Seeger's contention? Sabi dito, di ba, it's more of an integration among people and companies. So, for example, class, because of the movement of people, for example, situations like Davao City, na marami nang nagma-migrate, pumupunta ng Davao City para mag-aral, para magtrabaho, coming from different provinces around the Davao region and even outside Davao region. So the government of Davao City is being compelled to provide enough, for example, home to stay or place to live by to these people coming from different provinces and regions. So they are housing now subdivisions so that they need investors and developers. So hindi lang siya local, kundi international and national din. So what if, because of that, so they need to, just like what's happening now, they need to cut trees to create subdivisions in the hillside. So, nakakaapekto siya sa environment because eventually 'pag magkakaroon ng heavy rain, just like what's happening in Davao City, nagkakaroon ng baha in some other areas na kawa style yung area nila, yung parang sa ilalim medyo o yung sa gitna medyo malalim. So, yun lang yung area tapos the other part sa mataas na. So, kahit na nasa taas ka pa na part ng Davao City, if you have that kind of structure like Laverna, so babahain ka talaga in few hours, because of the heavy rain. So dahil walang masyadong irrigation, walang masyadong mga kahoy na sisip-sip sa mga malalakas na agos ng tubig coming from the heavy rain, so naapektuhan yung environment natin. Okay? So in culture, just like other entertainment industries, who keep on affecting the way we see things, the way we deal with things. Okay, so ganun. And in general class, let me not give the whole of this one. In general, yung human physical well-being, gaano nakaapekto. Sabi nga nila, because of globalization, it allows many people to be part of that, to get their opportunity, improve their status in life. But in truth, at the same time, because of globalization, the rich become richer, the poor become poorer. Kung nagkataas yung percentage ng mga mahihirap, nagkaliit yung percentage ng mga mayayaman. Dahil dumadami lang yung mahihirap, pero tumataas lang yung kayamanan ng mga mayayaman. Okay? So that's one point of view. So importante na kahit na ganito yung sitwasyon natin sa globalization, we are still finding ways to develop, not just physically, but the whole person in us. So ika nga nila, when there is chaos, there is always an opportunity. For the poor people who have no opportunity in trying to reach out their goal in life or their dream in life because they don't have resources. So with the advent probably of globalization, they can find a way to find opportunity to 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 improve their life from it. So yan. Other accepted definitions of globalizations, those who totally not do not subscribe to global sociological viewpoint, but at some point agrees that or argues that internationalization and multinationalization are actually phases that precede globalization. Meaning to say, bago nagkaroon ng globalization, may process pa. Others would mention localization, nationalization, then internationalization, and multinationalization. But some others immediately shorten na bago nagkaroon ng globalization, nagkaroon pa ng uh, sistema that each state will interact with one another, eventually reaching out to many state, okay, to state systems. Dahil ika nga, because the latter, which is globalization, heralds the end of the state system as the nucleus of human activities. Ano bang perspective, ano bang point of view nito? Ang ginamin dito, class, was actually because of the presence of globalization now that passes through from internationalization and multinationalization, it shows that government is not any more relevant. Okay? They are still helpful, they are still in need, but kung baga, with the presence and the advent of globalization, hindi na palaging we make use of a reference how each nation state would interact and treat one another. Okay? Kumbaga ngayon, you don't need the permission, okay, the intervention of the government in order to reach other people abroad, nor you don't need to reach the government of other people abroad in order to reach their citizens at the same time. So kumbaga with the advent of information technology and all other things, people will become more free and they are not anymore at at the mercy and holds of the government. So, what are some identification of this? It shows that globalization takes outside now the formal structure of nation state. So, kung baga hindi na siya basehan para magkaroon ng certain sense of globalization. Unlike before, kung baga, we can understand globalization if we can see how the nation state interact with each other, eventually reaching out more nation state hanggang sa naging globalized. Pero ngayon, it takes outside the formal structure of the nation state or the state system. Okay? Hindi na para maintindihan natin yung globalization, dapat mag-communicate ang one nation state to another nation state hanggang eventually reaching out to many nation state hanggang naging globalized. Ngayon, you can now meet, mention, discuss, reach out other people around the world without their intervention, without the intervention of the government. Next is it actually marks the increasing irrelevance of the nation state. So let me make a clear explanation on this. The term it creates or it started to mark the increasing irrelevance of the nation state does not mean that we can totally abandon the presence of the nation state. It only shows that most of the activities that can be likened and seen happening, okay, understanding the concept and phenomenon globalization can be more, okay, seen that there is no more or there is a less need of the nation state or the state system in order to understand globalization. But ika nga class, we cannot really get out from the holds of the state system because they are the one helping us regulate the situations that we are in. For example, yeah, you can communicate other people, especially in doing business. But if you do not have a nation state that you belong to, pag magbinuang or hindi mag-live ng maayos or hindi mag-transact ng maayos yung ka transact mo sa business niyo from other countries, mahihirapan ka talagang i-reach out sila. Okay? You could communicate, but they can stop the communication. And especially if kailangan mo pa yung products nila or yung bayad nila, so mahihirapan ka kung walang regulation ng mga nation state. So kaya kahit na there is an increasing irrelevance of the nation state, they are still in need. Okay? So kailangan pa din yung presensya nila. Now, globalization scholars who adhere to economic viewpoint argues that the phenomenon is more likely dominated by global economic activities. So kung baga mas nagkakaroon lang ng katuparan yung pagkaintindi natin sa globalization because of the global economic activities like the neoliberal regime. We will have to discuss that one in another discussion. Reduction of tariffs, yung pag-reduce ng tax na mga products na papasok sa ating bansa, just like rice. So, mas ganado yung mga businessman at saka mga investors ng mga rice na ibenta sa Pilipinas dahil mas maliit yung tax na babayaran pag magbenta sila ng product. So, yan yung reduction of tariffs. Okay? The creation of transnational corporations like Del Monte, Dole, so nakita nila na, uy, may mga product pa pala yung mga Pilipino na pwedeng gamitin para ibenta abroad. So they've created companies here like Dole and Del Monte. So hindi lang sila Philippine-based, but they are using their office here in order to generate more products so they can sell abroad with the permission and grant of the Philippine government. an improvement of multilateral trade organization, especially sa Philippines ngayon, hindi lang tayo dependent sa United Nations parang movement or steps in order to continue our economic activities with other nation states, but also as what we have mentioned or as what I usually mention, naging part tayo ng regional organization like ASEAN, whose one purpose is to enhance the economic status of each of the country that belong to ASEAN. So, yun yung bagay na dapat nating ma-remember. Now, what are the early usage of the term globalization? Are you still there? Nandyan pa ba kayo? Am I being so talkative that you will have information overload? So, I hope you're still there. If medyo mabigat na or hindi pa masyado because I'll be giving a long quiz next week on this before I proceed with the discussion. So, time quiz siya sa Creeper. So, importante. Don't worry, I'll be sending you for this time uh, uh, the PowerPoint presentation. I share this one to you. Kasi yung kinuha ko na handouts ito medyo madami. So, gi-mix up ko lang parang naging eclectic yung style. So, i-send ko na lang sa inyo ang PowerPoint. Eh, but probably in the next meetings, I'll be sending you a more detailed parang kumbaga handouts on the next topic which is the globalization of economy or global economy. So mag-send ako sa inyo. But before we will proceed with the discussion on this, on the next topic, next meeting, mag-long quiz muna tayo. Okay, about this one. So we will try to cover whatever it is that can cover during this meeting. Okay. So, but if you have questions, class, you can raise your hand or you can say or you can ask in the chat box. Okay. Anyway, you've responded, so I feel na nandyan pa kayo. So mamaya titingnan natin kung kailangan natin mag-recitation. Okay, probably random recitation or if not, so we will proceed with our discussion. Now, moving forward, going back to what we mentioned, what is the early usage of the term globalization? According to Oxford Dictionary class, the word globalization was first employed in the 1930. Sa Oxford ito ha. Pagdating naman sa Merriam-Webster, 1951. But it was widely used by economists and social scientists by the late 1960s or by the 1960s. So nagkaroon ng maraming pag-uusap, okay, about the term globalization or about the phenomenon globalization by economists and social scientists by the 1960s. Even Marshall McLuhan, a Canadian who analyzed the impact of mass media on society, coined the term global village in 1962. So, kumbaga may mass media na nagagamit noon kahit na medyo nahihirapan pa tayo sa Pilipinas. And Marshall McLuhan used the term global village. In general class, kung titingnan natin yung situation sa applicable application sa mass media, masasabi nating global village yan siya. For example, Facebook because it houses different races all around the world in one media platform. Okay? So, ganun yung setup natin. Now, globalization was first also used as a term in the academic circles in the decades of 1960s and 1970s, but only gained wide interest in the 1990s. So, na-mention na siya pero hindi pa talaga siya ganun ka-boom. Siguro dahil sa literature na gamit, nagsusulat pa yung mga tao, pinag-uusapan pa, tinitingnan pa. Kaya nga even until now, we have different presentations of how globalization is being defined, and at the same time, we cannot provide a definitive meaning of globalization. Yung kung baga, unlike physics, other sciences, may definitive meaning and definition of of those subjects. Pero sa atin, hindi pa masyado mabigat siya, kumbaga, na pangalanan or na-explain in a very definite manner. Now, however, it was if Marshall McLuhan is being ascribed to have used first the term global village, it was Theodore Levitt na nabigay talaga yung parang karangalan na siya yung unang nag-coin ng term na globalization. Okay? When it was credited to him with its coining through the article he wrote in 1983 for the Harvard Business Review, which he entitled Globalization of Markets. So that's more the applicability of it is actually more of economic. However, class scholars on the field of globalization in different disciplines. have actually different analysis and ideas about the phenomenon. For historians, wala silang masyadong concern sa ibang bagay. Ang gusto lang nilang maintindihan, they are more interested in determining whether globalization is really a modern phenomenon. So mamaya sa presentation natin, history itself presents a different mindsetting on when did globalization start and the concept of globalization. Okay? But historians are more interested kung baga, mas naintindihan ba natin kung ano yung globalization because of the presence of modernity? Kumbaga, wala bang ah, pagkakaintindi kung ano yung globalization even if it's not a term used before, eh, na hindi pa yun yung term but there are a glimpse of globalization. Hindi ba masabi nating may globalization na noon, iba lang yung paniniwala at paningin? Okay? So, was it more just a really modern phenomenon? For economists naman, wala silang pakialam kahit na kailan or ano ba yung tracing ng hindi sila masyadong concern yan. As economists, they look into the changing patterns. Yung patterns lang na economic, international trade and commerce as well as the unequal distribution of wealth. So masasabi ba natin that for economists, they can consider globalization as a phenomenon that started as early as the civilization would tell us? For example, noon kasi, uh, unlike now, we use different commodities and minerals in order to trade and even intangible things like cryptocurrency. Okay? Noon kasi in order to exchange products to other people abroad or to other people within that region, so ang gamitin nila is yung product nila mismo, an exchange of products or bartering. Okay? Then eventually they've created currency na ginagamit na lang yung kumbaga yung pera na ginagamit ng specific place or country para pangbayad. Eventually the use of the use of different standard like gold and silver hanggang sa bumalik sa currency. Kung na-observe niyo class, uh, the money of our country or the value of the currency of our country is a very important factor for our people to have enough, okay, and to have more than enough. Like for example, ang value ng dollars kaysa peso is mataas. So, if we really do business with them, okay, if we really do business with them, so kailangan natin ng malaki-laking kapital para at least makakompete tayo sa kanila dahil mas mataas yung presyo na babayaran natin if we compare to them. Okay? Though mas mataas lang yung cost of living nila. Pero ang nakaganda, if you service them or you provide services to them, you eventually get you get higher salaries in comparison to local. Kaya nga, maraming nagiging call center and agent dahil they are earning more than the local industry. Imagine, for example, other teachers, for example, here in the Philippines, like the public school teachers, roughly umaabot ng 800 uh, to 1,000 yung tatanggapin nila araw-araw. Gross yan siya class ha, daily rate nila. But in some other call center industries na medyo mataas din, even VA, virtual assistants, that's actually a very small amount. Ang iba sa kanila aabot ng more than 40,000. Yung 40,000 na sweldo every month sa doktor na yan sa public. Okay? So, gano'n yung diferensya. And when you work in public school, halos maubos yung oras mo. You still go to school at some point na walang pasok, kaya kailangan mong tapusin yung trabaho mo. Okay? Or if not, uh, you need to handle a lot of people. Unlike sa call center, after 8 hours duty, wala na. Okay? And yung qualification niya, hindi kailangan maging doktor para makatrabaho doon as long as you have the necessary skills. You can able to work in call center. So yung opportunity kumbaga, because the one hiring us were primarily the Americans who they pay less, but because of their value, the value of their money or their currency, we are earning more. Okay, we're earning more. So tinitingnan dito kung ano yung unequal distribution of wealth. Sa country like the third world countries like Philippines, ang setup sa atin, 'pag maraming naghihirap or 'pag the more people will be put into the poverty status, mas lumiliit din yung percentage ng yumayaman, okay? Unlike sa first world countries na parang because probably of the opportunities that they have na mas dumadami yung mga middle class kaysa mga mga upper class totally. Though marami ding upper class pero, mas madami talaga yung pag-ano ng middle class. So, lumiliit yung percentage ng mga poor, tumataas yung percentage ng mga middle class. Unlike sa'tin sa third world, mas lumalaki yung percentage ng mga poor. Yeah, at some point, lower middle class are also been growing. Eh, kaya lang because of our status, like marami pa din yung mga hindi employed, masyadong mataas yung qualification para makapagtrabaho sa isang trabaho na maliit naman yung sweldo. Tapos parang kumbaga we are we are working to live enough, kumbaga hindi talaga, masyadong mataas. If you would like to reduce also our expenses, so puwede naman. Pero 'yan, liliit din yung may savings ka, pero grabe kahirap ng buhay mo kumbaga. Halos ano na lang yung kakainin mo, especially if you're working sa mga ano talaga, sa mga anong tawag niyan, minimum wager. So, mahirap talaga ang buhay, okay. Now for political scientists, they focus more on the impact of the forces of globalization. Eh, ano ba yung, dahilan bakit nagkakaroon ng globalization? Ano ba yung mga different forces, especially on the international community like the INGOs and the international organizations. So, uh, we know for a fact, class, that the presence of international community can either break or, ano bang term yan? Either break or make the economy of the country. More specifically, 'pag madami yung investors natin from other malalaking country, mas mataas yung percentage na makatrabaho yung tao, mas maraming movement, yung pera na papasok hindi lang purely sa atin, so mas mare-reduce yung inflation. Ang mahirap lang nito is yung ownership. Eh, eventually mas madami na yung mga foreigner na nag-o-own ng different businesses because they like to stay in a country na mas malaki yung opportunity na mag-earn sila. Though it created jobs, more money comes in, and the inflation is a bit reduced at some point, or in one of the as one of the factors, because a different type of currency has been introduced na pwede nating magamit uh, when they invest to us. But yan lang ang opportunity ng ibang mga owners, especially big corporations. So nagiging competition. But as long as it doesn't totally affect the poor, kahit na nakakaapekto yan siya, kaya lang masasabi din natin, class, na if the business sectors will be so much affected with the international community, especially local business investors or local uh, business group, maapektuhan din yung society. Nagiging less yung kagustuhan ng mga business sector na tulungan yung government, mag-invest sa government para mag-improve yung economy ng specific locality. 'Pag ma-feel ng business sector na na-threaten yung situation nila, kaya, isa sa factor kahit na gustuhin man natin na maraming mag-invest sa Pilipinas, hindi din masyadong madami, hindi din masyadong madami. Okay, so gano'n yung isang factor. So, ah, even ano, class, INGOs, yung mga companies or yung mga organizations na wala namang bearing totally sa government, but because of their presence, like yung mga, ah, let's say yung sa UN, yung sa UNICEF, kahit na wala tayong ma-feel na impact nito, but their presence in every country would tell us that they are trying to either help us or either ask help from us. So trying to also check and balance the situation of our society, that either they would react even if they do not belong to our country. So kung baga nakakaapekto din yan siya sa movement ng globalization. Okay? Especially with the crafting of laws, just like ngayon, 'di ba? It has still been an issue kung uh, sa international community, if Duterte's presidency has violated many rights of human beings, especially Filipinos, that they wanted to or they wanted to come over to Philippines to investigate the matter and probably punish former President Duterte and other people who caused the death of other of criminals, kumbaga, during his time. Where that's the contention na pinapatay kung ba gano'n yung setup or hinayaan na namamatay. But it affects also the way we frame. Medyo careful ngayon ang administration ng Marcos para hindi mag-instigate lalo, tapos reducing also those who are against the administration and not so much attaching to the group of former Duterte para at least hindi masyadong ma-focus doon kasi baka ang ending niyan magiging dahilan pa ang Marcos administration na mapursu-pursu yung pagpasok ng international community. Kaya careful sila masyado kahit na hindi talaga sila connected sa government, but because of their influence, because of what they pursue, so eventually it can be a reason. Now, let's try to discuss globalization as a process, condition, and ideology. Globalization is viewed as a multidimensional set of social processes. Okay, so the context is the social part that generate and increase worldwide social interdependencies and exchanges, while at the same time fostering in people a growing awareness of deepening connection between the local and the distant. So this is the point of Stiger. In short, class, ang ginamin or ang ginasabi dito is that the presence of globalization can uh, or globalization can be seen as a social process wherein there is the presence of social interdependencies. Okay, so with the term social interdependencies and exchanges, so kung baga we cannot limit the setup or the perspective of globalization to one thing. So there will always be transformation. For example, class, kung may globalization na noon and the way they look at globalization is more of reaching out to people throughout the world with the use of transportation. Ngayon, naging iba, hindi na siya totally dependent alone with transportation. With the advent of information technology and other types of technologies, nakikita natin na you can now reach other people abroad. There is a continuous social interdependencies. Pwede ka nang mag-order sa Shopee kahit na hindi ka pumunta doon, kahit na madali na lang pumunta sa isang lugar with the presence of different transportation vehicles, pero you can now use with the advent of technology. So, pwede ka nang mag-order ng different products even abroad. So, ganun yung setup. Wait lang kasi. Okay. Yan. So, there is a growing awareness of deepening connections na between the local and the distant. Kahit na gaano pa kalayo, kahit na ah, ano pa yung sitwasyon, because of the presence of different uh, parang kumbaga anong anong term yan? Different uh, yeah, different agents of globalization like technology, transportation. So mas ma-reach na natin yung bawat isa kahit na malayo tayo sa bawat isa. Okay? If globalization is a process, then it denotes happening over a stretch of time. Diba? When we say a process, it's actually an activity that starts with a certain time and moves forward. So dapat it happen over a stretch of time. So the very first question that we need to address, if we'd really like to understand globalization as a process, is when did globalization start? Kailan ba talaga nagsimula? Okay? Importante yan siya para mas maintindihan natin kung ano ba talaga yung perspective or paano ba natin ma-situate na nagkaroon na ng globalization on this time. Okay? Makikita natin class, aside from this being mentioned in a diagram mamaya, a table will be presented. In every subject, they have different contentions about when did globalization starts with the keywords and the domains that they have mentioned. Okay? For a variant on a periodization of globalization, they refer to it as neoliberal globalization. Nagsimula siya between 1980s to 2000 class with the whole that it started with the advent or with the periodization of neoliberal globalization. So I mentioned that one kanina yung neoliberal regime. Titingnan natin sa economic point of view by next meeting ano ba yung neoliberal globalization. Okay? But the timeline is 1980s to 2000 nagsimula. In sociology naman class, it began in modernity. So, kailan ba nagsimula yung modernity? Okay? So, it began in modernity during the period of Renaissance, Enlightenment, French Revolution, and lasted until the period of industrialization in the late 1700s and throughout the 1800s. But still others class, maraming magsasabi na uh, the situation of the so-called uh, modernity started in 1800s with the advent of industrialization. But still others, there is no such thing as industrialization kasi without people revolutionizing their role in the movement of ideas and inventions, when secular people started to establish themselves and get out from the holds of the church, then eventually they are now the voice of the society hanggang sa mas mabilis kasi yung development, especially during Renaissance, nung mga European people started to assert their knowledge, their expertise, so that eventually people started to believe more on them. Kaya nga it's a fight during this time, parang nag-start na ng conflict between science and religion. Kasi noon, most of those in the authority were actually in the religion. Like pare yung nagtuturo ng pare yung nasa education, pare yung mga scientist, and major role in the society. But eventually, with the presence of the secular people like Descartes, Rousseau, Mill, Galileo Galilei, Copernicus, so nagkaroon ng boses, kumbaga, yung Charles Darwin, even uh, Isaac Newton and Einstein, nagkaroon ng boses. Okay? Yung mga secular people, yung mga hindi belong sa religious communities or sa priestly uh, ministry. Okay? Hanggang sa na-establish nila na science is not dependent on religion. And that religion is not science to the extent that science was more of an instrument or more of a subject pursued by secular people in order to understand the truth without being live under the shadow of religion. Pero at the end, na prove, napakita naman that there is no conflict between religion and science. Ang nangyari lang kasi noon, na overemphasize yung religion to the extent na na-suppress yung science. Kaya nga, ah, kung dahil sa paglabas ng mga secular people reaching out to the ends of the world, even Rizal is being affected to that. Mas naintindihan niya how things will work in a certain government by reading the works of Rousseau and Mill. So, makita natin class na modernity for some other people, especially globalization experts, has been it started even during the Renaissance time. Yung pag rise ng secular people sa pag pag-handle nila how things will be working in a society, especially bringing with them their banner, which is science. Okay? So, Uh, yan. Now, in political economy naman class, it can be traced back to 1500s. Bakit 1500s? Bakit hindi 1800s during the Industrial Revolution? Uh, Following Marx dictum, the conquest of the world markets marks the birth of modern capitalism. Because during this time, para kumbaga we tried the West reached the East na ba kumbaga during the 1800s. Marami na sa mga Western country na nag-explore sa mga Eastern country na dati mahirap i-reach out. So they used barko to travel, and one of that is actually the group of Magellan hanggang sa eventually actually in the history of the world class, there was a time in the 15th to 16th century na nag-away-away si Portugal at saka si Spain. Portugal and Spain is a very small country. Isa, connected lang yan sila by land, but they just separated by boundaries. So, maliit lang ng konti si Portugal kay Spain. But they became one of the most or two of the most powerful countries in the world, that there was actually an event in history entitled, I think, Treaty of Tordesillas, that they asked the intervention of the Pope to help them divide the world. So, hinati nila yung mundo. So, kumbaga, kahit na may mga tao na nakatira sa iba't ibang country because of the rise of their political power, marami silang influence. So, nagkaroon sila ng confidence at saka self-esteem na sila yung nagmamay-ari ng mundo. So, they divided the world. In truth class, when they divide the world, Philippines was part of Portugal. Okay? But because of the presence of the Spaniards already in the Philippines, and at the same time the conquest that they have started, they give up Argentina to exchange Philippines. So dati ang Argentina ang part ng Spain, pero gi-exchange sa Spain para makuha nila balik ang Philippines. So ganun yung setup. So it started with the Western expansionism that usually happened in the 15th century. Kaya many would say for political economy, especially with the word of Marx, nung we tried to reach out, or when the West, okay, reach out the East, they did not just conquer the East, but they bring with them their products, as well as also they carry the products of the East. So especially yung mga spices. Kaya mas mataas na chance na ma-preserve na yung mga pagkain with the presence of the spices. So yan. But however, putting 1500s and 1800s by political economists, they also mention na hindi lang then 1500s, may 1800s. They try to put uh, the two timeline as categories to understand when did globalization begin. So it's actually the birth of modern capitalism, that raises the issues of Eurocentrism, especially during the 1500s class. The East tried the West tried to reach the East. So especially the West refers to Europe before. So they carry with them their culture para i-influence. Kaya nga kahit na naging independent na tayo, ma-feel pa din natin yung impluwensya ng West, especially ng mga Spaniards, because they stayed in the Philippines for more than 300 years. But looking into also 1800s, especially with the advent of industrialization, mas nakita natin yung hold ng mga ng mga European people. Kumbaga, whatever is European is always superior, so we always need to look up to them. So ganun yung situation. Kaya very Eurocentric. If now we have Americanization, so uh lalo-lalo na sa Pilipinas, pag sabing Amerika, for example, iPhone over my phone, so kalimtan na si my phone, piki man na si my phone, dili man siya paspas, di man siya pulido, di man siya quality. So we tend to want those that have higher standard. But at some point they sell with them, their standard. Pag sabihin natin Amerika, mas mataas masyado yung standard. So I think there is a need for the Philippine culture to expand and develop more. Hindi lang yung may katotohanan naman mas mataas yung quality, pero dapat tayo mismo, no, mga Filipino, we should raise our standard to the standard of other nation states, so that we can also say that there is the products that they have provided us is not always, or is always superior to our products. So, pwede naman nating magawa yun, kumbaga, if we just want to. Kaya lang, it takes a very long process. But the way they do things also shows that we are colonized mentally. Ganun yung setup. Okay? And also the intellectual apartheid. Here, class, what we are trying to mean by the political economies is uh, the Eurocentric perspective and intellectual apartheid shows that everything that make the West possibly connect to the East and influence most of the East mindset was purely because of how the intellectuals of the West started to assert themselves and eventually became very influential, to the extent that without this intellectual people, even if they bring with them industrialization, mahirap masyado na ma-carry over sa East ang mga perspective sa West. Okay? So, ganun yung setup. Without Mill, without Rousseau, without Bentham, without sino pa ba ng mga group of people? Uh, yeah, Kant, without Einstein, without all those people, Newton, so Tesla and some others, medyo mahirap masyado na kahit nadala na nila yung kultura ng Europe, uh, they cannot really totally influence and colonize or bring with them. Parang kumbaga, we tend to have always a dislike on them if without the intellectuals presence in their countries. Okay? And equivalent to ignoring earlier forms and infrastructure of capitalism. Okay? Noon kasi sa mundo, we have used agricultural land as a form of capital. But eventually, with the advent of industrialization, naging machine na. Hanggang ngayon, titingnan natin kahit na may land pa, may machine pa, 'pag wala kang pera, wala kang capital. So, yung focus is sa pera, hindi na sa machinery nor sa land. So this is an example of a table class being presented in different disciplines. For example, sa economics, sabi nila, dalawa ito, 1970, 19, and 2000. So it started on this time. So for 1970, nung nabuo yung mga banks, international financial institutions, technologies that created global population, world product, world capitalism, it started or mas nakita natin yung situation, yung presence ng globalization. In the 2000 naman, yung mga hedge funds, yung mga sovereign wealth funds, especially it created new economy, especially in the field of yung financial system. Noon kasi class, 1970s, we need a tangible products. Ngayon, kahit na wala kang tangible products, but because it was being entertained by the international community like cryptocurrency and many others, like how your money revolve around the market. So, mas gina-consider na nila 'yan na, and that can be a consideration towards and identifying that there is globalization. For political science and international relations naman class, sabi nila it started in 1980 with the advent of internationalization of the state, cross-border social movements, yung kumbaga pagpasok ng mga INGOs, yung mga hindi na kailangan na mag-ask ng permission within the state to state setup. Uh, Especially during this time, mas nagkaroon na ng anong tawag nito, ng boses yung iba't ibang citizen ng iba't ibang nation. Okay? So, yan. So, there is international order, international law, competitor states. Okay? Those were the keywords or themes that we could use. So, 1980 na nagsimula. For geography naman, class, it started 1980 then. With the presentation of how space, place, global and nodal cities has been presented, especially with the movement of people. Okay? From one place to another, mas nakitaan na nila na, okay. Nang simula yung globalization, na na-realize ng mga tao that they can transfer from one place to another and stay there permanently. Unlike before, Manggod, especially yung panahon na nagpapastol lang yung mga tao, they're raising animals. So they keep on moving from one place to another, but they don't have a permanent address, so they cannot really improve or they cannot really provide so much improvement in the place that they stay because they will eventually get out from it. So unlike now, yung movement of people shows that 'pag nakatira ka na diyan, you usually stay there for good together with your descendants eventually. So, nagkakaroon na ng pagbabago kumbaga. There are more opportunities in the cities, there is urbanization, okay? There is already globalization na you can now buy products around the world or outside your country, not directly passing by to your national state but leading towards your local state. So, ganun. For cultural studies naman, I'll just go over with this one class. Anyway, it's more of trying to identify based on how these different disciplines understand when did globalization began. So, cultural studies, 1970, uh, especially with the advent of advertising, aesthetics, representations. So, for example, sa setup ng Amerika ngayon class, the most likely America were the one influencing the East, but eventually because of the impact of the East to West, especially with the Indian traditions and cultures like Orientalism, like yoga, meditation. So umabot siya sa America and some other countries in Europe and the West so that it eventually became influential. So ganun yung parang impact ng cultural media. So for media studies naman class, especially with the advent of different social media platform. Okay? So for example, the keyword global village, so mas nakitaan na okay, this is where globalization start. When in global media, especially media studies, people started to assert their connections with one another in a so-called media platform. For philosophy naman class, when we started to realize that our problem is not anymore our local problem, but our problem in the world, especially with the presence of the global warming, the so-called climate change, the different environmental factors that's affecting the whole world. Uh, it started with the 1980s, yung na-realize, 1950s pala. especially with the starting point of the United Nations na kailangan nila mag-gather, pag-usapan how to address. So that's the ethical point of view of philosophy. So it started in 1950. Sa sociology naman class 1800s, ang pinag-uusapan talaga nila is yung sa modernity. Okay? Kung kailan nagsimula yung capitalism in a form of industrialization, yung urbanization, okay, and nation states, kung paano yung different places has been crowded and other places has been nawawala na yung tao dahil yung trabaho ay hindi na nandun sa agricultural lands but nandun na sa city dahil sa pag-introduce ng mga machineries. Okay? So, ganun yung setup. For political economy naman class, nagsimula sa modern capitalism or the modern world system wherein it tries to reach the ends of the world, the conquest of the world market because of Western expansionism. Okay? History and anthropology, ito yung sinasabi ko na sa kanila, they don't really focus just alone on the modern economy, but even with the population movements, cross-cultural trade, the spread of technologies and world religions, tracing back as early as 3000 BCE, masasabi ng mga historians na may form of globalization na noon. Okay? May form of globalization. So, yan, Ah, ang pinaka-ano talaga niyan nito class is yung sa biology at saka psychology. Wala silang sinabing specific time, time lang. So meaning to say, nung nagsimula na imbento yung oras, yung time, dun din nagsimula yung globalization. Kahit na globalization was more ascribed to people, but with the integration of ecosystems, nagkaroon na ng interdependencies of different entities, okay, in the planet. So, yun yung ah, sinasabi ng ecology at saka ng biology na hindi necessary nagsimula lang siya ah, sa modernity or sa pag-realize ng mga tao. So what is the root of globalization? We are still in the process. So tracing the roots of globalization can be done by looking for signs of globality. Ano ba yung globality? It's actually the thickening of social linkages between people from different parts of the world. So ibig sabihin yan class, as long as people started to realize their connections, their interrelations, their integration, whether it's in economy, in culture, in social aspect, and even in communication, transportation, there is a growing understanding of globality. There is a thickening of social linkages. So ito daw yung dito daw natin matitrace na nagsimula yung globalization. Okay? So looking for historical evidence of growing worldwide community, it actually implies longer timeline. So kung titingnan natin or kung hanapan natin ng historical evidence of growing worldwide connectivity, hindi lang natin masasabi na, nagsimula lang talaga yan siya sa modernity, especially with the creation or with the movement of industrialization. Okay? Hindi lang ganun. It implies longer timeline since increasing connectivity is not just a recent trend. If kung titingnan na lang natin as basis yung globality, the thickening of social linkages, even before even before Swiss Canal was opened in 1833, even before the yung barko na ginagamit para maka-reach sa east, may mga ways na for example, I forgot the term, it's actually it will be mentioned sa global economy natin, yung part ng wait, let me recheck. Yeah, the Silk Road system. Ano ba yung Silk Road system? Yung main commodity nila is silk. Okay? So Europe tried to reach the east in order to buy products and they passed by the Middle East. So kahit na international community lang siya, but it was already a starting point. Okay? Kasi if our main reference is the social linkages, there is a social linkages and it's thickening between people from different parts of the world. Kaya lang hindi lang siya naging worldwide kay limited lang man. They pass by or they travel by land man. Europe will travel by land. So hindi sila gumagamit ng barko during that Silk Road route. Nawala lang yan siya during the fall of Ottoman Empire. Okay? Kaya the resort to na gumamit ng barko hanggang sa umabot sa point si Magellan nag-offer sa King of Spain na we can travel all around the world and we can bring the honor to you. So, kaya nag-travel sila, nagtituyok nilang tibuok kalibutan kahit na hindi na naka-witness si Magellan. Now, globalization is actually spurred. Ito yung dapat nating ma-remember din class. Pag sabihin natin globalization is usually spurred, okay, by innovation. Okay? May new things, may bagong pamamaraan, may innovative ways palagi pag sabihin natin globalization, whether it's in transportation or even in communication technologies and creation of institutions of commerce. Okay? So, time and again, we could always say that there is globalization as long as there is innovation. Kasi innovation entails the movement of people, the changes in the economy, the struggles of every individuals, and even the relationships with each other, with all the people around the world. So economists emphasize the beginning of globalization in the 1820s or 1800s when commodity prices across continents. So ginasabi din dito na nagsimula talaga yung globalization because of the presence of globality, and it happened in 1820s when the commodity prices could across continents converge. So nagpang-abot sila, hindi na lang yung ang basihan ng pangbabayad ng isang country is using the commodity of that country, but because there are no so much products on that different countries, so they exchange those products, they sell it and buy it through either silver and gold, okay, or even their own specialized products. So as long as there as long as the commodity prices across continents converge, it can be an implication that globalization started on that certain time, according to economists. And other theorists believe that globalization is synonymous to permanent global trade. Okay? Pag sinabing there is a permanent global trade, there is always globalization, which actually began when all major regions of the world, ito class, exchange products continuously. The term is there is a continuous exchange of products of all, of all nation states or around the world, especially with the major regions. Kasi global hindi lang siya multinational. And on a scale that generated deep and lasting impacts on all trading partners. So with the emergence of world economy class, so uh, in short class, for economies, with the emergence of world economy, it's already the starting point wherein there is globalization. With the emergence of world economy that started in the 1500s, and others say it's in the 1200s, and even John Hobson, 2004, an author, dates it's much earlier than 3500. It already shows that there is already the growing economic activity that can be an example of the starting point of globalization. Now, let's move forward to understanding globalization as a condition. Okay. So time check 9:06. So probably we can finish uh s- baka next meeting na natin yung theoretical. I'll make this one faster. So dalawang isang ano lang man si globalization as a condition. Babalik lang siya sa point of view that uh globalization is also referred by scholars as globality, a globality. For Skolte, it refers globalization refers to globality. Okay? So he did not mean that globalization is globality. He means that with the presence of the social linkages, the thickening of social linkages, which is globality in understanding, there is the growing understanding or movement or direction of globalization. Now, it refers to globality as a social condition characterized by transplanetary connectivity and supraterritoriality. Ano bang ibig sabihin ng transplanetary? Ito yung pag-establish ng social links between people at different places of our planet. So, kumbaga, it's more of how people reach one another throughout the world. That's transplanetary connectivity. That can be a reference of the social condition that we are referring to as globality. Okay? And superterritoriality. Ano ba yung superterritoriality? It's the social connections that transcend territorial geography. Okay? Meaning to say, class, Colty contends, okay, that globalization refers to the thickening of social linkages, which is more of a social condition, okay, which is more of a social condition, especially seeing in it that because of social interactions, social connections of people, regardless of places, that they are able to establish what globalization is. In other words, globalization as a social condition is being characterized by thick economic, political, and cultural interconnections. Iba't ibang dimensions ng globalizations with their interconnections and global flows that render political borders and economic barriers irrelevant. So may dinagdag pa. Okay? Nagkakaroon ng thickening of social linkages with the advent of different uh, dimensions of disciplines like economic, political, and cultural, in application to interactions and interconnections, okay, more likely because of the growing irrelevance of political borders and economic barriers. Okay? Economic barriers. So yan. Now, how do we understand then if it is an ideology? For Stiger class, he explains that globalization exists in people's consciousness. So diyan siya nagsisimula. Bago natin to makita sa society, titingnan mo natin bakit nasabi ito ng mga iba't ibang tao na ganito yung society. So for Stiger, it started with our consciousness or with people's consciousness because it consists of set of coherent and complementary ideas and beliefs about the global order. So kung baga, bago nila nasabi na ganito, naisip muna nila ito sa iba't ibang sitwasyon na nakita nila sa mundo. Okay? So in other words, class globalization is a political belief system. Why political belief system? Because without having it seen in the political order, in the political activity, parang walang pagmumukha yung pagkakaintindi natin sa globalization. Because global order will only be happening if there is an intervention of those that creates order within each local and national societies like the state system. Kaya political belief system talaga siya in general that benefits a certain class, kumbaga. And most of this are actually those who have the power and in resources. Okay, for a while muna class, let me just drink water. So what are the six core claims of Stiger about globalization of globalization as an ideology? Meaning to say, ito yung core claims na gimension ni Stiger na it is globalization because we have a certain sense of understanding in our consciousness, in our mind on this. Okay? Na nakikita natin that we can confirm most likely happening in the society. Una, globalization is about the liberalization and global integration of markets. In truth, class, kung hindi nanalo yung liberalism sa history, kung nanalo yung fascism at saka communism, medyo mahirap na magki-communicate sa iba't ibang tao sa mundo. Dahil limited lang yung freedom ng bawat tao. If communist yung country, for example, North Korea, so pinagbabawalan sila makicommunicate to other people, maraming limit sa kanila unlike South Korea. So sinasabi din dito that because of liberalization or liberalism, so mas natulungan na mas ma-express, ma-develop, ma-spread pa ang globalization. Okay? Another description of Stiger when explaining this concept or this core claim is that globalization is about the triumphs of market over governments. Kung baga, mas pinahahalaghan, okay, ngayon ng sitwasyon natin, ng mundo natin, yung karapatan ng bawat tao, okay, in terms of how they were actually functioning in society, especially in markets. Okay? So, mas, kumbaga, it's like saying na mas ginaalaw ng government ngayon na instead na mag-intervene sila para makuha nila yung iba't ibang mga ways to earn taxes or to gain taxes from different consumers and sellers and buyers sa Shopee na kukunin nila yung karapatan, mas nag nag nagpa nagbigay pa sa kanila ng tamang pag-iisip na they are just guide. They should not intervene. The relevance should just be limited to regulating that taxes are being paid, okay, at some point. So kaya nga ngayon, if you would like to join affiliate marketing sa Shopee at saka sa Lazada, kailangan mo nang kumuha ng business permit. Okay? Because the situation of globalization today, uh, the integration of markets is more triumphant than the intervention of the government. Okay? Second is globalization is inevitable and irreversible. Meaning to say, kahit na anong gawin natin, kahit na tumira pa tayo sa bundok, doon tayo manirahan, doon tayo mag-anak, doon tayo mag-asawa, doon na tayo hanggang sa mamatay. Yung nangyayari sa mundo, nangyayari pa din because it's actually hindi siya maiiwasan. kahit na nandun tayo sa gubat, okay, aabot at aabot din yung point na kailangan nating i-reach out yung other people and mafe-feel natin yung impact ng globalization. Kung hindi siya maiiwasan, hindi din siya puwedeng ibalik sa nakaraan. Kumbaga, it cannot be reversed. Okay? So, kung ano nang nangyayari, kaya nga, sabi nga nila, the best way to live in this world is if you cannot fight it, join it. Okay? So that you will know how to live with it. So, hindi naman sa lahat ng pagkakataon, especially in terms of our values and morality, hindi naman maganda na you just compromise whenever many people are doing that one. Importante din tumayo. But in terms of globalization siguro class, especially on how we deal with it, kahit na ayaw natin, kahit na nakakaapekto sa buhay ng ibang tao or even sa atin, kailangan nating maintindihan that it's irreversible. Nangyayari na siya. Okay? Pangatlo, nobody is in charge of globalization. But I would like to add a point of view on this one. It is true that nobody is in charge, kahit na sino, because everyone is a player. Kumbaga, the opportunity is open to all. If you have resources, good. You can gain more with the of because of the presence of globalization. But it doesn't mean to say that you're the only one gaining. So it's eventually open to everyone else. Kaya lang, let me just also say this na yes, nobody's in charge of globalization, but those powerful and have resources can redirect the movement of globalization. Best example natin dyan, class, is yung sa setup ng cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, kay Elon Musk. There was a time when Elon Musk mentioned on Twitter na he was planning to invest in cryptocurrency. That eventually happened, kaya tumaas masyado yung value ng Bitcoin. Then eventually, Elon Musk mentioned na mas gugustuhin niya na daw mag-invest sa sustainable energy. So, biglang bumaba naman yung value ng cryptocurrency after that one. So, we know Elon Musk is a very influential person in the field of business. Whatever that he says, it might have an impact on the economy of the world. Okay? It also shows then, class, that because Elon Musk is in power, he can at some point redirect the movement of globalization. And ang example lang natin kanina is yung sa cryptocurrency. It has been a sensational topic up until now. Maraming yumaman sa crypto kung baga. Kahit na you are just 17, 18 years old, if you know how to make use of cryptocurrency with the ability that you have, you can gain more and you will be earning more than 6 digits every month in comparison to those others. So, ganun yung setup. Number four, globalization benefits everyone in the long run. Sabi ko nga kanina, yes, nobody's in charge, but those who have power and resources can make the direction of globalization possible. But it doesn't mean to say that only those who are in power can benefit from it because of the opportunity offered by globalization kahit sino. Kaya lang, we can still say na syempre, if you have the resources and power, mas malaki yung percentage na na benefit ang makuha mo kaysa sa percentage or benefit or percentage na makuha ng mga poor people or yung mga less fortunate individuals. Okay? So, ganun yung setup. Now, number five, globalization furthers the spread of democracy in the world. Now, with the presence of liberalism, mas nabigyan ng chance na mapakita ng mga tao who are pro or who are actually following the movement of globalization na with the presence of liberalism, mas ma-express, mas mag-improve yung globalization. So that they also, kumbaga, promote that a country should be democratic in order to spread more globalization. So the best example that we can see on this one is the comparison between South and North Korea. Mas mataas yung chance na mag-improve yung state if yung country is liberal, though hindi naman siya totally ganun. It's not always like that, like other countries though. China is already a blend. So, communistic communist man ang kumbaga yung system ng China, pero sinatawag nila yung country na the Republic Peoples of China because people can still do something for the sake of the government na hindi naman siya limited in comparison to North Korea. Okay? But because of globalization, mas maraming tao ang mas gusto na magkaroon ng democratic country kaysa communist country. Okay? Eto class, though this is assumptive, but it's happening that globalization requires a global war on terror. Okay? Kumbaga, the more globalization spread, okay, uh, was actually because there was an attempt to 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 inculcate in the mindset of all people, especially those people who are not capable of really fighting for their country, that because of global war on terror, mas na-spread pa yung globalization. Okay? Though I mentioned this one, this is assumptive, but nangyayari actually ito. Like for example, class, kung na-observe nyo, most of those that redirect the movement of globalization are not for third world countries, but first world countries who manufacture firearms and other type of artilleries like Russia, America, and even China. Kumbaga, ang isa sa reason bakit ayaw nating makipag-wage war ng China kahit na most of the things that being mentioned is that we are dependent on most of the products of China. Ang isa din talaga sa totoong dahil na natakot tayo. We don't have so much uh, materials to fight for and against China, and China have already advanced their country. So kumbaga, if we fight against China, baka ang ending niyan mawawala sa mapa yung Pilipinas. Maraming mamamatay. Okay? So yan. Okay, so yeah, I think I will just yan, hanggang dito lang ako siguro sa domains. So let's start mentioning the impacts of globalization on the academe. Okay? 1970s gained the interest and wide attention of of most social scientists. So nagsimula nilang pag-aralan yung globalization. Doon nagkaroon talaga siya ng pag-boom during 1990s. But the surge in the number of scholarly works about globalization has been one of the reason bakit mas naintindihan natin ano yung globalization. So meaning to say, mas nakatulong yung presence ng mga uh, academic scholars natin on globalization para mas ma-introduce kung ano yung globalization than just being talk about it. Now, enrichment of literature in globalization, such as studies on transnational sexualities, global tourism, evolution of state institutions, the restructuring of work and the improvement of working conditions, and so many others, actually help integrate and understand, and if not develop and probably spread the clear understanding of what globalization is. And ang nakaganda nito, mas naka-explore pa tayo ng other topics that can be related to globalization, which is actually a very important topic in our today's generation. Okay? So it shows class that globalization has impact on human lives. Now, globalization literature suggests actually two major branches of research. Okay? Yung una, those who are studying specific problems, like, for example, gender or issues, okay? Gender or sexuality, then they try to relate it to globalization. Like, trying to get the, ang tawag nito, the what's the right term? The sympathy and the empathy of other races in the world, from one country to another country, about the importance of recognizing the sexual and gender preferences of other people that eventually spread out throughout the world. Okay, so naging globalize yung discussion on sexuality and gender. Okay, so ang specific issue talaga is gender and sexuality, but they relate it to globalization. Ito yung unang branch of research. Yung pangalawa is focusing primarily on the concept of globalization itself, theorizing the very nature of the process. So kumbaga trying to understand what is really globalization. Dumakonect siya partially yung other topics that can be used as an example in understanding globalization. Pero yung major topic is about globalization. Ano ba yung globalization? Ano ba yung basehan bakit magkakaroon ng globalization? So may mention diyan na nagkakaroon ng globalization when there is a social interdependencies of peoples around the world. So mat-attach yung discussion ng sociology, culture, even transportation and information technology. But still focusing on the concept of what globalization is. Okay, so yan yung literature ng two branches that talks about globalization. So, what are the things that we need to remember? What are the questions that we need to address or ask? So, these are the main questions that help us understand better globalization. Kumbaga, with the presence of these domain questions, mas redirect tayo para mas maintindihan natin ano ba yung globalization. Unang-una, when did globalization begin? So, di ba? Ito yung una sa pinaka-importanteng tanong na dapat nating ma-address. Kasi mas maiintindihan natin kung ano bang ibig sabihin ng globalization. If, for example, if we say it's in 1800s, then we try to say that globalization is more of an integration of economy. Okay? But if we say in history it started even as early as 3000 BCE, then it's more of a movement of people trying to interact with each other. Okay, despite it's not yet worldwide. Okay, so if you look at naman biology and ecology, it's not limited to people. As long as there is an integration of different entities or ecosystems, it can considered a glimpse of globalization. Baga gano'n. So, maraming mga bagay na dapat nating ikonsidera para mas maintindihan natin when did globalization began. Okay? And as a teacher it's myself, I cannot really provide a definite explanation and say that this is the time that globalization started. Ika nga hanggang ngayon pinag-uusapan at pinagdedebatehan pa din 'yan siya dahil iba't iba yung contention ng iba't ibang discipline. So, who we are to provide a definite explanation on the matter if we ourselves have limited understanding and resources about it. Second is the core of the process economic, political, and cultural. Importante din to. Okay? Ano ba yung core ng process na pagkabuo ng globalization? Kasi if we look at it, like say, economically, then uh, it only happens, globalization only started to happen when people started to reach out with each other in terms of economic activities. Okay? Pag sabihin naman nating political, then it happened when each community has established their own government that they used as a way to communicate other government. Pag sabihin naman natin cultural, then as long as that certain culture has been developed in that certain group of individuals and they try to connect it to others, okay lang sana kung sasabihin nating media culture kasi masasabi natin na ah, recent trend pa lang yan siya. Okay, recent trend pa lang yan siya. Hindi pa siya nagsimula sa ah, starting point on the ancient times. But if we say cultural, that is based on how people interact and reach one another hanggang nagkaroon ng intermarriages, nagkaroon ng war, conquest. So, masasabi natin even as early as the ancient times. Okay? So, what is the core of the process? Also, the third one, does globalization refer to a process or a condition? So, mas titingnan ba natin na ang globalization is a process or a condition? So, crucial din ito class. If we say it's a process, then we can say that it just started over a stretch of time in different way of seeing from different disciplines. But if we also say it's a condition, at some point we provide a definitive explanation that that globalization started from this time, okay, with this certain condition. Number four, what is the relationship between globalization and the nation state? May puwang pa ba yung nation state sa sinasabi nating globalization? And can we still say that without the nation state's intervention, there can be no globalization? Or so to say, that globalization cannot proceed without international and multinationalization. Number five, to what extent is the relationship between social structure and territoriality being redefined by globalization? Okay? Kailangan pa ba nating tumira sa isang lugar para masabi nating we belong to that place or we belong to that race? Or even if you are not a citizen of America, you can communicate with American people. Though limited lang siya, hindi ka talaga na-cover sa law nila, but you can communicate with people on that certain place. And you can befriend them and there is an integration of markets by establishing a business connection. Okay? Without being a citizen there, without really staying or going there. So ganon. Ganon yung setup. So these are important questions that we need to address when talking about globalization. Okay? So, yan. Yan yung setup natin. Now, I think I will have to finish this one in another time. Ito, medyo mataas din ito. Though, these are some important theoretical paradigms na masasabi natin useful siya para mas maintindihan natin yung globalization bago natin i-present yung different misconceptions that globalization is internationalization, liberalization, or even universalization and westernization. Okay? So before we end, may I ask you if you have some questions? Okay? Or if you have some questions, class, I would like you to write it down and probably we can address it first next meeting before having our quiz. Okay? Nandyan pa ba kayo? May tanong ba? Can you respond if there is none or if there is? Para at least alam ko.
Wala po, sir.
Okay, so walang tanong. So, hopefully, you can craft a question class or probably before we will have a quiz, magtatanong muna ako after my discussion para at least makita natin kung may direction ba, may ano ba yung pinag-uusapan natin and na-remember pa ba. So, we've been able to finish the first stage which is to explain. The second stage is very much important kasi nasa inyo ito. How will you retain the understanding? Which case there will be assessment at a later part of our time. So magse-send ako ng I think mas maganda siguro class kung mag-quiz assignment na lang tayo para at least ma-review niyo from time to time yung mga tanong kasi gagamitin natin yung tanong para din sa examination niyo. Tsaka ma-review niyo. Yung quiz assignment, you can repeatedly answer it. Ang setup lang natin sa quiz assignment ngayon for this time only, the one that I'll be recording is yung first attempt answer. The usual case kasi yung gina-record ko is yung highest score or yung last attempt ay yung attempt na highest kayo. But for this time, when I'll be sending 1 week yung duration natin, so probably by next Saturday pa yung deadline. Okay, so we will work on that. But I will have siguro quiz assignment. But don't worry, I'll be sharing the PowerPoint presentation para may review kayo. Okay, so please take note extra on some of the important discussion on this matter. Okay. So since there is no question, it's 9:30 already. We need to stick to the time and observe and respect each other's time at the same time. So let's end this with a prayer class. Let us pause for a while and pray for God's blessing. The name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory to the Father and to the Son and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen. Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. So long, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Ingat kayo palagi.
Thank you po,
Bye-bye.
sir.
Bye, sir. Thank you po.
Sir. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.